In this lesson, we'll learn how to manage the appearance attributes of an object using the Appearance panel. Alright, now if you remember early on in this course, we talked about objects in Illustrator can have three types of appearance attributes applied to them. They can have strokes, they can have fills, and they can have effects. Now, Adobe's given us one central location to apply and manage these appearance attributes for objects, and it's called the Appearance panel. If you look over here, I've got it in my panel dock. It looks like a little circle with a stroke around it. If you don't have that in yours, don't worry, you can open that by going to Window and choosing Appearance. It's also the keyboard shortcut Shift F6. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just undock this and drag it up here near the top of my screen. And to be honest, as I'm working in Illustrator, this panel is usually floating somewhere around my workspace because I like to come here to manage all my appearance attributes instead of having to come over and open another panel, come up to my control panel, or even my tool panel. So let's go ahead and just drag this up into the corner, and let's just look at these basic shapes I've got on my screen here. Now really there's two main functions of the Appearance panel. One is managing appearance attributes. The other is object identification. If we just drag a marquee around this basic rectangle, you'll see here that it says, hey, that's just a path, and it's actually giving us a thumbnail preview of the object that we have selected. Now if I go over here and select this letter form, you can see here that it's telling me what I have selected is a compound path. So it's going to identify the different types of selections that we make with our objects. Now let me just go ahead and select this rectangle again for you here, and let's explore this panel and take a look at what all it includes. Now we have here basically our two primary types of appearance attributes applied to this shape. We have a stroke and we have a fill. Now just looking at the stroke here, we can actually click on this little colored thumbnail and we can actually access the color of our stroke through the stroke panel. Now notice that when I clicked on the stroke, a little orange highlight appeared over it, so we have this stroke selected. Now I can also come over here and I can manage the weight of that stroke right here to the right of the color selection. So in dropping down a little further, we also have an opacity setting. Now let me just deselect the stroke here. If you notice here, we have sort of a blue hyperlink on several of the areas here. Now that indicates that we're going to be able to access another panel right here from the Appearance panel. If we click on the word stroke, we're going to get the stroke panel pop open immediately to the left. And likewise, if we click on the word opacity, we're going to get the opacity panel. So you can see here that we can access several of the panels right here from the Appearance panel. Now let's take a look at some of these buttons down here below. Now this first button is going to be to add a new stroke to our object. And then we have a button for adding a new fill to our object. So we can actually add more than one stroke and more than one fill to an object. The next button here is for accessing your effects. Now if we drop that down, you'll see here there's a large list of effects. We're actually going to go into more detail about these effects in an upcoming lesson, so I won't hit on those too much now. But this next button to the right of that is to actually remove the appearance attributes of an object. So if we click that, we're going to reduce that object to just a path. So let's go ahead and undo that here. And this next button, this button is going to duplicate a selected item. Notice we can't click on it right now. But if I come up here and I highlight my stroke, we can actually duplicate that stroke just by clicking on this button. We can also remove the stroke here by clicking on the little trash can icon. Alright, now if we look over here to the left of each of our appearance attributes, you'll notice that there's a column with a little eyeball in each one. We can actually come in here and actually hide our appearance attributes if we want to do that. Now notice that some of these eyeballs are grayed out, in particular the opacity ones. Now that's because I haven't actually made any changes with regard to opacity, and you can see that here because they all say default next to them. Now we haven't talked much about opacity up until now, but let's go ahead and dig into opacity for just a moment. Opacity is a really important feature in Illustrator, and it can be applied in multiple ways. Now, we can actually choose the opacity of just a specific appearance attribute here by clicking on this opacity link, and again we get our transparency panel. Now notice here in the transparency panel there's a lot of options. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the two up here at the top right now. Over here on the left we have our blending modes. We can choose a number of different blending modes to actually apply to this appearance attribute. So anywhere from normal darken, multiply, so on and so forth. If you've used a program like Photoshop, some of these are going to look familiar to you. Now, we also have an opacity setting. We can click this little arrow here, and we'll get a slider. And let's just go ahead and drop the opacity of our stroke down some. Let's drop it down to about 50. And let's just deselect that here. And you can see here now we have a 50% right here. Now we can come in and actually hide that opacity change, and we'll go back to our original 100% opacity. So we can actually make opacity changes to both the stroke and the fill here, independent of one another. This third opacity setting here is for the entire object. So if we wanted to make an opacity change for the entire object, we could do it here. Let me just go ahead and change that opacity back where we had it here. Now, if you remember earlier, I talked about being able to add multiple strokes and multiple fills to the same object. So let's just zoom in here and take a look. We can come in here and actually add a stroke to this object. And let's just change the color of this stroke. Now let's go ahead and change it to, let's just change it to this pink color right here. Now notice that this pink stroke is actually hiding our blue stroke. And I tell you what, let me just go ahead and increase the size of that stroke some. That's because there is a stacking order within this appearance panel, and it applies to both the strokes and the fills. So we can actually select this stroke that we just created, and let's go ahead and drag it underneath the blue stroke. Just like so. And you can see here now both strokes are visible, and both strokes are actually straddling the path right in the middle. So we could actually take this this pink stroke and move it even underneath the fill. So all we see is the outer portion of that. So in my opinion, this is actually a really cool feature in Illustrator because it's going to allow us to really get creative in applying appearance attributes to our objects. Let's come in here and just modify some of these. And I tell you what, let's come in and let's give it a different fill color here. Let's go ahead and apply maybe this red fill color. And let's give it a new fill color here. And I'm going to come in here and select this gradient right here. This is a black to transparent gradient. It's actually in your swatch panel as a default swatch. So let me go ahead and apply that here. And let's go ahead and drag that down on top of this other fill, but underneath our strokes. And you know what? Let's go ahead and change the opacity on that. Let's change the blending mode to multiply. And you know, I don't like that stroke. Let's go ahead and hide that. So you can see here how by applying multiple versions of strokes and fills, we can really create some interesting effects on a single object. Now I want to go ahead and take a moment to zoom out here, and let's take a look at this object, this letter B here. Now this object actually has an effect applied to it, and you can see that third type of appearance attribute down here at the bottom. Now it also appears as a little blue link. Now we can actually click on this blue link here, and we can access the settings for that specific effect. So you can see here how an effect is treated in the appearance panel. Now I want to go ahead and show you one other type of object. We've got some text up here. Now let me go ahead and just select that. It's going to look a little different. Now you see here it shows the word type, and then we have the word characters underneath that. So we've got a type object selected, and if we want to come in and actually modify, say, the color of this text, we can just double click on the word characters right here. And you can see here that it selects all of our text, and it actually switches us over to the type tool. Now in this mode we can actually come in here and change the fill color if we wanted to, just like we were with the other object. So if we want to come back to the type object, let's just double click on type, just like so, and we'll come back up into the original object. Now let me just go ahead and deselect that here and zoom out. Now up until now we've been pretty much modifying the appearance attributes of existing objects, but let's say we want to create a new object, but we want to actually specify the appearance attributes before we create the object. So let's just come to this little flyout menu and clear our appearance here. And you can see here that everything's set to nothing. Let's say we want to go ahead and create a black stroke around our object that's about, let's say 4 points. Let's give it this light green fill. And let's say that we actually want to create an object that has another stroke behind this one. Let's go ahead and give it another stroke here, and let's make this stroke, let's make it white. And we'll drag that down underneath our black stroke, but we need to make it a little bigger. So let's come in here and change that to about a 6-point stroke. Actually, you know what? Instead of white, let's go ahead and change that to something that's going to be visible on our artboard. Let's go ahead and give this an orange stroke. Okay, now we can go ahead and select, say, a shape tool. Let's grab our rectangle tool here, and let me just show you one other important setting. Now, these are non-traditional appearance attributes in that we have more than one stroke. Now, your basic appearance attributes are going to have one stroke and one fill. Now, if we come to this little flyout menu, you'll notice here that there's an option that says New Art has basic appearance. Now, with that checked, if we draw a new object here, we're only going to see one stroke and one fill. So let me go ahead and undo that here, and let's deselect that option here. Now when we draw our new object, it's going to have exactly the appearance attributes that we specified. So we can zoom in on that and see here that we have both strokes and the fill. Alright, so in this lesson we have learned about the appearance panel here in Illustrator. Hopefully you see exactly what a valuable panel this really is. Now in the next lesson we're going to continue on where we're leaving off here, and we're going to take a closer look at what we can do with a stroke.